I think that's always an interesting part of what does an architect do, and it's kind of the Wizard of Oz, go behind a curtain and pop back out with a sketch. And this is a very early on sketch that we did that made the house one long piece of house here that was the 16 feet wide that we ended up with. And Medora looked at that and said, you know, I don't want the study there. I want the study to shift over to the side. So that would be a typical way that a client has input into the process where it's a collaboration. And I find that a very wonderful part of the process. It's not just my design. It's the client has a big voice here too. And it's fun.
Well, and I remember before this first sketches started to emerge, I was fantasizing what would this house be like, and I would come over to the site and look at it and try to imagine a house on it. And I remember my first thought was, I want the study to be off. I want it to be on the first floor so it has easy access to the kitchen, but I want it to be apart from the first floor so it feels a little bit private, so that I can have people into the house and not necessarily have them in my study. And so when I looked at that first plan with the study as part of the whole long house, I immediately said, well, that's not exactly how I visualized it. And so Sarah and I and someone else in her office who was working with us just sort of noodled it for a while, and the next drawing had the study off to the side.
So when we're in the design process working on a house, one of the prime things we want to come up with a concept for is what are the materials, and that begins with what does the client like. So that's part of the questionnaire, and that comes forward to coming up with a palette of materials, of which this is a sample here. And we started with this bluestone here, which has wonderful colors in it, and the other pieces then came to match that. And then there's the wonderful red floor, which was Medora's idea.
Well, the story of the red slate is that for energy reasons, we wanted the ground floor to be slate because slate conducts heat much better than wood does. And we could have made this floor slate also, but we chose not to because I felt that it was cold. So I went and worked with a designer who I've been working with for many years, who was part of our design team, to find some slate. And what I realized very rapidly was that most of the slate I was being shown was from India. And I felt that unless I bought slate from the United States, I had no reasonable assumption that the environmental and child labor laws were being followed in its production. So I said that I was going to be limited to slate that was in the United States. Well, it turns out there's one quarry. It's in either Vermont or New Hampshire, and it had 5 choices of color. And we were looking for the right gray, and suddenly it occurred to me, red! Red would be great. So we ended up with red slate.
When I am beginning a design of a project, one of the basic aspects that I like to figure out is how is the daylighting going to work? And I think that is it seems like a secret puzzle to people who haven't thought about it a lot. And you think big windows are going to let a lot of light in. And that's certainly the start of daylighting. But really, you need controlled light. You need to not have glare in the spaces so that they're very pleasantly lit. And that's where it gets to be a complicated little puzzle. This is an area where we always build models and think it out carefully and talk to the client about what do you want the light to be like in your space. On the top is the sun peg, which creates the orientation of the house or connects the orientation of the house and the model, such that you can take photographs with a small camera looking inside the model and replicate what the conditions will be in the daylight of March, of June, of December, and then show them to the client and say, what do you think? How's this? And Give.
It was a great moment when I saw a photograph of the light coming into the house and could start really imagining what it was going to be like to live in this space that I'd only seen in 2 dimensions up until that moment.
So in the process, the client has a big voice in the shape of things, and what do I want in the house? And I think one piece of that was a big impact here was a rug.
I owned a Persian rug, which I had brought from another house to the house I was living in before this house that I loved. And I sat with the drawings and sketched out the size of the rug, made a piece of paper, and tried to figure out where it was going to fit. And it wasn't fitting anywhere. And so I emailed Greg, who's Sally's associate, and said, where is my rug going to go? Because I had a fantasy it was going to go here in the dining room space. He said, how big is it? And I told him, and he said, it's not going to fit anywhere. And I said, well then, the house is too small. So the solution was actually to add some space down the center of the house and to make this bump out, which is a wonderful addition because it's given me an enormous linen closet downstairs, plus a more interesting space here and in the bathroom that's underneath it.
And the rug's not here.
And the rug isn't here because it was wrong.
So it's the gift of the rug.
The rug moved on.
Gift of the rug that isn't here.